Over in Puerto Rico, FEMA reported that it will restore 55 public schools against earthquakes. Now, these improvements will benefit students, teachers, and those who work within the schools, and they're expected to impact the communities where the spaces are located. Our Francis Felix reports.
FEMA has allocated a total of $150 million to modify the structures of some 55 public schools to make them more earthquake resistant and meet updated building codes. FEMA confirmed that the initial obligation of $35 million has been allocated to the Public Housing Administration through its Hazard Mitigation Grants program. The funds for the first phase of the project will be used to evaluate and determine if they are historic properties or if they are located in a flood zone. During the second stage, funds will be allocated to cover the cost of auctions, permits, and construction.
There are 55 schools that have been identified by the Department of Education, schools that didn't suffer damage from the earthquakes, but are vulnerable to having damage because they have short column issues, different engineering issues that need to be fixed. So the first phase of the project is to identify those 55 schools, make sure, know whether they're historic buildings, which have to be treated differently, whether, they're in a flooding area. So those projects now are going to identify the solution for making those schools more resilient. As you remember, the short column issue was a big issue here, so we have identified the 55 to make sure that we can address those concerns and make sure that they have the funds to fix those schools. And those schools, they're a perfect example of mitigation. The schools have been identified as having more vulnerabilities to earthquakes, so we got to make sure that we assign the funds so they can be made more resilient to any future disaster, including, earthquakes, hurricanes, whatever might come our way.
The mitigation grant program main purpose is to reinforce these buildings to reduce the risk of future seismic events and mitigate loss of life and damage to critical structure. Most of the 55 schools were designed and built following old building codes and have structural flaws such as short columns and unreinforced walls. Reporting from San Juan, Puerto Rico, Francis Felix.